Let's get to our political panel now. Joining me is former New South Wales Liberal leader Kerry Chikarovski and former Labor advisor, now the Managing Director at Hawker Britain, Simon Banks. Great to see both, Kerry. A big week for the government, big week in national politics, actually, because Peter Dutton and Angus Taylor will also be putting the final touches on their budget reply, which will be very important as well a year out from the election.
Oh, absolutely. This will be setting the stage for the next election for both sides of the House. The government clearly are going to be putting out some pretty interesting sweeteners to the community. I'm a little nonplussed. I don't know that Minister Clare's going to have anything left to announce after his last 2 days, because he's made some pretty big announcements there. But also, I mean, it's going to be very clear that the government is going to have to be putting up a cost of living relief package. Some are already announced in education. Can only assume there'll be something in energy, but it'll be interesting to see what other measures, because at the end of the day, it is now becoming perfectly clear that cost of living is the number one concern for the Australian community. The opposition then will have to work out which of those measures they're going to actually support, because as we've just heard from Minister Clare, they will have to go into the Parliament. I'm sure that they're going to support anything which is going to provide relief in terms of education, but will be interesting to see what others. Energy probably, but I'll be very curious, because the opposition's been pretty clear that they don't want any more inflationary pressure from this budget. So they'll have to make decisions about what budget measures they are going to wholeheartedly support.
Indeed, and you heard the language from the Treasurer. He's saying, Simon, that this is, it's not going to be a scorched earth austerity budget. It's not going to be a free-for-all, that he's got the middle ground. But it is such a fine line, isn't it, for him right now? RBA deliberating tomorrow. Some economists think they might even hike rates tomorrow, Simon.
Well, of course, the Reserve Bank makes independent decisions. But you're right, Kieran. I mean, the economy's coming up to an interesting point of transition. And there are, I guess, sort of two competing models of what you do in this environment. You can go the scorched earth approach, cut spending, hope that you can, if you like, buy an interest rate cut. If you go and look across the ditch in New Zealand, that's effectively what the new New Zealand Prime Minister is doing over there, and there's a lot of pain about to be announced for middle New Zealand as a consequence of all of that. Or you can take this more balanced approach, which Jim Chalmers is proposing, which is, yes, we need to try and make sure that we keep inflation in check and continue going down, because we do want to see ultimately interest rate cuts for the Australian people. But we also need to buy the next round of economic growth. And the answer is the world is in a fierce competition for investment in a number of key sectors, whether it be the clean energy transition in areas like pharmaceuticals and the like. And if Australia's not playing on that game, well, we're not buying the jobs and prosperity of the future.
Kerry, when you look at the next 12 months, there is a scenario where if inflation proves to be as sticky as some fear, that I know many people with mortgages would hate to hear this, but there could be a scenario where it's better economically and politically for the government if the RBA were to move tomorrow instead of being forced to move 2 or 3 times later in the year potentially. That's the argument that's made by some economists right now. Politically, the government never wants a rate hike, but there is that scenario.
Well, politically, it would be better if the pain was closer to now than it is closer to the election. I mean, the problem for a government when the RBA is raising interest rates on the eve of an election is that the people who get blamed for it, because even though Simon is correct, this is an independent body, but the people who get blamed for the interest rate rises tends to be the government. So if I was the government, not that they have any influence over the RBA, but I would be kind of saying, well, if you're considering an interest rate rise, do it while we've still got 12 months before the next election. To be honest, though, nobody wants an interest rate rise anytime soon. What people are actually looking for, Kieran, is an interest rate cut. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who feel that, they're not going to be affected by interest rate rises, because not everybody has a mortgage. But the flow-on effect to investment properties and to renters and all those sorts of things mean that there's a lot of people who are genuinely totally concerned that if the RBA keeps raising interest rates, that they're going to be in absolute mortgage stress, and that means that they will start to look for someone to blame. And as I said, if it's nobody else around, it's going to be the government.
Indeed, and it is a blunt instrument. We've said it so many times, Simon, because there is a big cohort in the community that are doing just fine right now. Those without mortgages, but still assets with that are going to benefit from and have benefited from rate rises over recent months.
Look, it's one of those very difficult things. I mean, the truth is about half of Australia is doing quite well despite the interest rate rises for the very reasons that you've said, Kieran. But the other half of Australia is under real stress, whether directly because they're paying a mortgage or indirectly because of the level of inflation. We've got to get the balance of those things right. And look, I mean, ultimately the Reserve Bank will make an independent decision. It won't look at the politics of what it does. It will do what it thinks is in the best interest of the economy. But the reality is the things that are probably causing inflation in the economy at the moment won't be fixed by another interest rate rise. If you look at those pressures that are out there and some of the international pressures that are starting to drive inflation, for example, in the United States, that's not a cause based here in Australia. So really, I think the Reserve Bank is going to make a balanced decision. It'll be interesting to see what they do, not only tomorrow, but over the next 12 months. The real key thing, though, is that this budget does need to manage that cycle, but also set up Australia for success into the future.
True, Simon Banks, but as you have argued and others as well, a number of different prescriptions being put out there right now as to how to do all of that. Kerry, great to see you as well. We'll talk to you soon.